The guy tearfully begged Brother Zhang for at least $4 million in help. Previously, he had turned to a fortune teller, and she had predicted his luck, so he was sure that he would hit the jackpot. His account received 3.5 million yuan. He grinned, knowing that the apocalypse was coming soon, and he wouldn't have to pay back the money, so he was going to prepare well and live a better life than the last one. In the news, alarmingly reported on a powerful solar flare, which will cause the temperature of the Earth to reach more than 50 degrees in all regions. And humanity plunged into a hellish heat apocalypse. It was the 2nd of March, 2030. It was on the pedestrian street of Poshana, inside a regular diner. The dangerous man wanted to tell him how dangerous it was to borrow money from him. He lit a cigarette between his lips. Haiga grinned. He was a member of the Baha'i gang and was engaged in underground loans. He reminded me what a huge percentage he had. The guy sat fearfully under the supervision of his guards and stuttered with fear. He knew about the interest rate and was willing to take on the debt anyway. Haiga was willing to give 5 million to get 7 million in half a year, so he asked for a receipt and demanded an equivalent deposit. The guy handed him the documents for his apartment. He rubbed his chin, realizing that the cabin was a little old and looked like it was worth about $4 million. In fact, it was a spacious apartment of 144 square meters, and also at a huge percentage, but he still refused to lend it to him. The guy didn't stop begging, asking for at least 4 million, knowing that the fortune teller predicted his luck and promised to return 10 times as much. Haigi wasn't ready to give more than 3.5 million, but he was already glad that he had a young gambler in his hands. He jumped with happiness, thanking him for this chance. The man demanded to return 5 million in 3 months, otherwise he will take the apartment, and demanded to write a receipt. The guy started reading the paper and agreed, but there was one thing. He wanted to give Haige one condition. 10 minutes later, the guy happily came out and thanked everyone for their cooperation. His account received 3.5 million yuan, but his face turned from innocent to gloating because he knew about the upcoming apocalypse and was not going to return anything, and now it remained to prepare so as not to repeat his past life. In his previous life, Earth was hit by a cataclysm that completely changed the Earth's ecosystem. As a result, the average temperature rose to 50 degrees Celsius, and now people were caught up in the heat all year round during the day. Haiga laughed viciously that the stupid guy had agreed to the increased percentage, considering gamblers to be the most naive. His assistant turned to the boss, realizing that the guy's apartment cost more than 4 million, but he gave him less money, worrying about the catch. The man smiled nastily, having already learned the behavior of such people, and knew that they were ready to sell their own family for money. He gave the order to arrange with the casino that the guy was processed, and not only the hut was stripped off, the guy was standing there looking at the phone with a smile on his face. He knew that they had agreed to lend him money only because of the interest, and they thought they could get him divorced. The guy was absolutely not going to give up what had already fallen into his hands. Then the earth dried up, plants died, creatures mutated, and order collapsed. All the resources were in short supply, and people were willing to kill for a crumb. If you had any reserves, then you had unlimited power. Even former billionaires and celebrities were willing to beg on their knees for a piece of ham or a sip of water. Otherwise, they will have to go out on the street to meet their deaths. And now after his rebirth, he had the time before the disaster to prepare everything in advance. He went into a cafe and saw 2 girls talking loudly at the bar. The place sold the legendary Ice Assassins, which cost more than any other ice cream. The guy frowned sharply and thought about it. In his previous life, he hadn't allowed himself to do this, but he had bought it more than once for Liu Xiaoqing's trash, and he considered it a terrible waste. His eyes filled with rage and his heart ached just from the memory, so he was going to enjoy himself. He confidently walked over to the bar and asked for each type of ice cream for 10 pieces. The girls looked at him in shock that a simple guy would have such an opportunity. The girl at the bar doubted that he was rich and decided to clarify the seriousness of his order. Their ice cream was only high-end, and 10 servings would cost more than 20,000. Another taunted him for looking like a beggar and swore that she would get down on her knees if he could pay for it. The guy turned on her sharply, demanding that she keep her words. She didn't expect him to actually expect her to bow, not knowing what he thought he was. The guy grinned, intending to make her bow in time. She started to get angry and argue. He showed her his bill with millions, demanding to pack all the ice cream in portions, but the girl was going to call the manager first. The store manager, Fei Qi, walked up to him. The guy demanded to calculate the cost of all the ice cream in the store, suggesting that today no longer open. The manager got nervous, immediately starting to do this. While he was counting, he was trying to figure out what kind of big shot he had in front of him that would buy up a month's revenue in one fell swoop. Their ice cream was expensive, but there weren't many people who bought it. He said that the goods in the window cost 70,000, but together with the warehouse, the amount reached 1 million. The guy grinned, realizing that it wasn't too much, and was going to empty their warehouse, and in time for the apocalypse to close the house and eat ice cream. He decided to transfer 300,000 as collateral and asked to deliver all the ice cream from the warehouse to his address. The guy grinned as he offered the ladies whatever ice cream they wanted. After all, he, Chen Xiao, was willing to pay for everything. The girls in the background were delighted with his generosity and wealth, which made him all the more beautiful in their eyes. But he reminded her of their argument, waiting for her to bow. She opened her mouth, trying to say something. But in the end, she still fell to her knees and began to cry. Chen Xiao didn't understand why she was showing off like this. It was already sunset and he went to the park. He sat on a bench and ate ice cream, feeling why it had such a name and price. Chen Xiao also recalled his ability while twitching his hand. A black square emerged from it. Thanks to this, he could keep things in their original form, so he would always have fresh ice cream. And when the apocalypse came, all the stars and models would bow down to him, and he was looking forward to his success. He didn't expect the superpowers to be reborn with him. After all, they had only started to awaken since the beginning of the apocalypse. Chen Xiao didn't understand how this had happened, but it was to his advantage. Next, he planned to create shelters, cold storage facilities, weapons, and energy reserves. At that moment, he received a call. It was the same Liu Xiaoqing who called him. He picked up the phone, remembering his life. When Chen Xiao's parents died, she appeared like a savior, and he was very stupid when he considered her a ray of light because she was only interested in his inheritance. Liu Xiaoqing hugged him and relayed her mother's words that she asked him to buy a huge apartment in the center and put a record on it and also an expensive ransom. To him, she was a bottomless pit, and she held out her hand until she got all the money out of him. She manipulated him, claiming that he was doing it all for the sake of his future family, offering to sell his old house just to buy a luxury apartment in the center. At one point, a man's hand pinned him to the floor. It was Liu Xiaoqing who presented the man with the very special material that he was looking for. Chen Xiao realized that he had been protecting her all this time during the apocalypse, and she had chosen a stronger patron and sold him out. The man didn't see anything wrong with it. He was going to eat it. In the end, there wasn't even a body left of him. But now he was ready to pay her back in full. Meanwhile, in a luxury hotel, Chen Xiao picked up the phone, asking what had happened. She sadly reported that she had lost her favorite gold chain while walking with her friends. Chen Xiao pretended to be empathetic towards her, promising to buy a new one, but there was a vindictive smirk on his face. But then he offered to buy not one, but as many as 10. Liu Xiaoqing didn't expect him to be so generous. Chen Xiao began to tell her that he had invested a little in cryptocurrency and made some extra money, deciding to spend all the money on it. She was beginning to worry that it was all a scam, but he wanted to prove it to her when he earned it again, and he was going to play big. Chen Xiao smilingly informed her that he was going to borrow money for a large investment, but for this he needed a guarantor, intending to pay her interest later. She couldn't answer when a man came into the room to check on why she had taken so long to wash. Liu Xiaoqing hugged the grown man, telling him that she would be done soon. One night with the old man, she received 5,000 each, but she was going to earn more by becoming a surety for Chen Xiao. She was sure that Chen Xiao was too cowardly to deceive her, and had no doubt. The call was already completed. He grinned, waiting for her to take his bait. But it's time to build his hideout. Chen Xiao had purchased a place where he could turn it into an impregnable bunker within a month. The windows were going to be made of bulletproof composite glass with invisible bars, and the walls were going to be reinforced with up to 3 meters of bulletproof concrete. The roof had to be covered with solar panels, an autonomous generator for power supply, and an air filtration system were added. Another autonomous ecosystem, including an oxygen supply and water recirculation system, explosion-proof doors, a double-check system, biometrics, and a mechanical lock. The live-in guy listened to his plans. In a month's time, he had to convert the house into a high-impact fortress with a life support system. The guy opened his mouth in shock, not realizing who was standing in front of him, either paranoid or a survivalist. Chen Xiao began to suspect that the protection master for the shelters wouldn't be able to handle his requests, even though he claimed otherwise. The master realized that he was facing another crazy rich man who was brainwashed with the end of the world, and now he is spending money. Chen Xiao showed him the deposit of 1 million and left the rest to him to choose from. He arrived in shock, not expecting such a sum, because with this transaction he will pay for his entire life. But Chen Xiao warned that he was very demanding of quality, so the evaluation would be strict. The master shook his hands, guaranteeing him an impregnable fortress. They both had black plans for each other. One wanted to rip off the client, The other was not ready to give him the rest after the apocalypse began. Chen Xiao thought that the basic items were easy to get. But the most dangerous thing about the post-apocalypse was not natural disasters, but human nature without laws. He was going to buy edge weapons in the hardware store, and firearms that can kill on the spot are hard to get. He reached into his phone. At that moment, he received a message. When he contacted the person, he was assigned a deal at 8 o'clock in the evening. Chen Xiao was embarrassed that such a deal had been arranged in a crowded place. At this moment, many footsteps were heard. A group of men was running after the girl, and she noticed a stranger on the way. She immediately hid behind Chen Xiao, but they were going to get her. The girl with tears in her eyes begged to be saved. Chen Xiao immediately recognized Li Yu, who was unexpectedly in such a place. The men took the girl from behind him. They grabbed her by the hair as she screamed in pain. Chen Xiao looked at her with concern. This was the best student in the school, the goddess that all the boys were drawn to. He frowned sharply. The guys continued to demand money from her, grabbing her by the hair. His friends started offering to accept payment in cash if she didn't want to pay back the debt. But Chen Xiao firmly ordered them to let her go. They immediately turned towards his voice. One of the guys rushed at him to deal with the brat, who decided to stop them. Chen Xiao's eyes filled with anger and his brow furrowed. He abruptly dodged the man's punch and lunged down. Chen Xiao grabbed the bandit's arm and spun him around. The boy screamed in pain. Then Chen Xiao took advantage of the moment and slapped him across the face. From this blow, the bandit was sent flying several meters away. Negative emotions were found in the form of fear, acute pain, and anger. Suddenly, for him, he had a system that successfully activated the collection of negative emotions, even though it wasn't there in his previous life. One of the men continued to hold Li Yu, threatening to finish her off. But Chen Xiao had already jumped up and sent a brick flying towards the bandit's face. All of his friends froze in shock. Another guy suddenly appeared in front of them, who didn't want to watch a crowd of men offend a girl. Everyone abruptly started running towards them to deal with them. But Chen Xiao met his punch, and the second one knocked the bandit off his feet. Chen Xiao clicked his tongue and dodged the bandit who was falling. He slapped the boy across the face with all his strength, and together they scattered a whole crowd. They kicked one in the chest just as he was falling to the ground. In the end, all the attackers were sprawled on the ground. Chen Xiao ordered them to scram. The system started collecting all their negative emotions, which allowed him to unlock the expansion of space. He grinned, curious about it. Chen Xiao held out his hand to Li Yu, who hadn't expected to meet him here at all. He helped her up, worried that she'd hurt herself. And then he helped her put on her shirt, but she still had things to do, so she had to run. The second guy praised Chen Xiao for saving a beauty and introduced himself as Mu Chang. Chen Xiao realized that he was the one he had an appointment with, and Mu Chang was surprised by the coincidence. He took a stance like a heavenly king covering an earth tiger. Chen Xiao wasn't sure what the idiot was doing. His system detected negative emotions from Mu Chang, which consisted of shock, confusion, and awkwardness. Chen Xiao accepted the role after all, and started his play where the pagoda subdues the river demon, explaining that he was just joking. Mu Chang understood the joke and called for him to follow. They went to his house, and Mu Chang handed him the goods from Russian friends in which was reliable and unkillable, but there were not enough bullets. He noticed Chen Xiao's fighting skills and decided to give his new friend a discount. His movements were well honed, and it was obvious that Chen Xiao was a pro. Chen Xiao asked if the silencer would be a gift and asked for a warranty card and a box of ammo. Mu Chang was shocked that his new friend was so brazen. He was shaking with anger that Chen Xiang hadn't even given him double the price, and he was still demanding a guarantee and a gift. Mu Chang was angry that Chen Xiang compared their shop to household appliances, and the system detected strong negative emotions of shock and heartache. Chen Xiang explained that he just asked a question and was going to pay for everything right away. In his head, he recalled what was left of his plan. Night had already fallen. Lu Xiaoqing was standing in a fancy restaurant wearing a fancy dress. At that moment, an arm wrapped around her waist. She started complaining that Chen Xiao had made her wait too long, so her legs were stiff. She started asking about his investment and whether it was definitely not risky. Chen Xiao insisted that this was just a formality and he couldn't frame her. Xiaoqing understood that he was too much of a henpecked person to do such a thing. The two of them went to the man's place, and Xiaoqing immediately started signing the contract. After signing, the man began to laugh at her stupidity, because she does not become a guarantor, but simply takes all the debt on herself. And he already imagined how she couldn't pay him back, and they were using it. Later, she would have to pay with her body. Chen Xiao watched as she signed the ill-fated contract, and this would cover his safe haven. The master assured Chen Xian that all the materials in this house were reinforced to the highest military standards, and there was thermal insulation, sound insulation, protection from explosions and drilling, and even will be able to withstand a couple of nuclear strikes. Chen Xiang thanked him for his excellent work, but it was a plus for the master on the contrary, and he took his bank card with a smile. He sat down on the sofa and opened the box. There was news on TV warning that due to the powerful activity of solar flares, abnormal heat is expected around the world, and the temperature in the regions will break historical records, advising people to take protective measures. He loaded the gun and was happy that it's finally starting. Outside the window, a huge sun was already visible, which would soon destroy the Earth. It was reported that due to the impact of a catastrophic solar flare, the Earth's ionosphere is experiencing severe turbulence, and extreme temperature anomalies are now being recorded around the world. Citizens were urged to take measures to prevent heat stroke and avoid going outside. Chen Xiang knew that this was just the beginning, even though the temperature was already rising rapidly. The girl's body was drenched in sweat. They were standing on the balcony, and they couldn't figure out when this terrible weather would end. Vendors on the street were reporting a deadly threat and an increase in temperatures for the next week. So supplies were running low, and it was better to buy now, otherwise they would not have a drop of water later. He only wanted to make some extra money from this disaster, and he was going to hit the jackpot. He was warned that the price of watermelons was too high. The man didn't hear them and looked at the bodies. He started selling them watermelons that were as sweet as honey, and offered to cut one to taste, and was going to give them a discount for 2 watermelons. The man continued to flirt with them, but they only wanted to take 1 watermelon. He kept insisting on buying more while he could, because there would be nothing left in the heat. An elderly man approached him, asking to lower the price of water, but he sternly refused. Chen Xiao looked at the salesman, clucking, and he was terrified of Li Defu's greed. He recalled how in his previous life he picked up goods from the floor, and Li Defu grabbed him by the scruff of the neck, pretending that he was stealing. Chen Xiao insisted that he didn't steal anything, but the man twisted his arm. The whole society started judging him for stealing at that age. He was in a panic, unable to prove that he hadn't done anything. Now he was reborn with these memories and went to the store. He glanced at the shelf of merchandise. There were chips at a 1-to-1 promotion, but at a high price. Chen Xiang turned to him, not understanding what the chips should be made of at such a price. He looked back at him in shock. The system detected intense negative emotions of disdain. He snatched the bag of chips out of his hand, doubting that the guy could afford them. The system detected an annoyance in him. Chen Xiao wondered how he cared about the goods, doubting that he could sleep like this at night. Li Defu opened his mouth in shock, not knowing what to say. Rage filled him, and he didn't understand why the guy had the right to talk to him like that. Chen Xiao asked him to calm down, asking if he was worried about insomnia, lower back pain, and constant fatigue, and he realized that this was true. Li Defu began to worry that his treasure had a problem with feng shui. He started to deceive him by pretending that he had a problem with the energy and yin-tang point, and abruptly spun it up under the guise of inspection. This was a classic case of kidney deficiency. Li Defu tried to hit him, not trusting him and trying to chase him out of the store. He advised him to take care of his nerves, especially in this condition. And I threw him a penny for a lollipop, assuming that at this rate he would bring himself to the grave. His coins clattered to the floor. The system detected intense negative emotions of rage. Night fell, and a black cat ran past the store. Chen Xiang appeared in front of him, recalling his past life sufferings, how he allowed himself to be trampled on, but was going to return everything with the proper interest. And he remembered what the system said about expanding the capacity for negative emotion points. The system absorbed the points and expanded the storage space. He raised his hand and used the ability. A grin appeared on his face. The day came, and the birds were chirping in the tree. Under this tree, Li Defu passed by in a good mood. But when I got to the store, I was shocked. He walked in abruptly, realizing that something had happened. All the shelves were completely empty. His face was confused with rage, and he couldn't figure out where his goods were. He held his head, not knowing who could have done it. The system gathered a lot of negative emotions as Chen Xiao watched him from the cameras, and calmly sipped soda from the can. He sat contentedly in his chair. Li Defu ran around the store crying and shouting, trying to take revenge for the goods. He fell to his knees and burst into sobs and screams. Everyone watched him suffer, not knowing what to do without the goods now. The women heard that they saw a black shadow like a ghost. Li Defu turned around in shock at their words, unable to believe his ears. The system continued to collect negative emotions in the form of fear. Chen Xiao ate chips amid the noise, content with passive earnings. He was going to put in a little light and give her some extra stimulation. While Li Defu was dying in the background, Chen Xiao was crunching chips loudly. Everyone noticed the bag of chips in his hands. Li Defu immediately recognized his item from the packaging. He remembered how the same guy had come in the previous day and complained about the price of chips. Then he cheekily beat him up. Li Defu grabbed Go's arm, suggesting that he had robbed his shop. Chen Xiu made a surprised face, not knowing what to say. He demanded proof before proceeding with the assault, and he advised not to say nonsense without arguments. Otherwise, it may lead to consequences. Chen Xiu noticed that the store was really empty to the last crumb, so he decided to share the rest of his chips. Li Defu was sure of his guilt, as if he had cursed him, so the goods were gone. He was going to squeeze anything out of him to cover the losses. The system detected negative emotions in the form of rage. Chen Xiao reminded that such chips are sold on every corner, and he doesn't have such exclusive rights anymore. The crowd echoed his words, but everyone remembered the guy complaining about the prices. Li Defu couldn't believe that the guy had taken the courage from somewhere. Chen Xiao then offered to search his house, and if he found even one thing, he promised to return it tenfold. But if not, he would take his backup generator. He accepted the argument, intending to see how long the guy would last. Li Defu pulled on his hand, intending to find a product from him and profit from it. They came to a rather rich house, and the whole crowd was shocked by the amount of money. Even the chandelier glittered with wealth. Expensive clothes hang on the rack, and the refrigerator was completely filled with different food. There was no room for gold in the safe anymore. Chen Xiao burned Li to fire in a shocked state and asked if he was sufficiently convinced. He quickly made a dash for the exit, realizing that he had screwed up and decided to look elsewhere. The system detected shame in him, but Chen Xiao grabbed him by the collar, not going to let him go so quickly, reminding him about the promised generator. Moreover, there was a whole crowd of witnesses in front of him, so he can't go back on his words. Li Defu pretended that he didn't remember or hear anything, but Chen Xiao didn't change the subject. Everyone started judging him for shamelessly going back on his words. The man tried to hit him, but Chen Xiao grabbed his fist. He squeezed it and twisted his arm, causing Li Defu to fall down and cry out in pain. The system collected the emotions of pain. Li Defu shouted with all his might, promising to give everything. Chen Xiao ordered him to hurry up before the temperature rose outside. He knew that the electricity rationing would only start in a few days, and Li Defu would be lost without this generator. He quickly ran away and closed the door behind him. The phone on the table rang, and it was Liu Xiaoqing. She immediately started yelling at him, telling him that unknown people had been chasing her for 2 days. Liu Xiaoqing didn't understand why this was happening if she just signed the papers. She continued to scream, realizing that the Ocean Gang was looking for her and that he had deceived her. Chen Xiao continued to play the role, pretending that he was only doing everything for her sake and from the bottom of his heart. He didn't expect them to start hunting so quickly without patience. Chen Xiao called out to her, hoping that they didn't know her address. Liu Xiaoqing managed to cross the road in time to confuse their trail, but she ordered them to speak seriously. Chen Xiao assured her that she was too worried and people might just mistake her for someone else. He put the phone back on its stand and pointed to his desk. Liu Xiaoqing's face glistened in pleasant shock. She saw that he had a delicious red fish steak on his plate. But I didn't understand when he had such food. Chen Xiao boasted that this was just the tip of the iceberg and that he still had a lot of things to do. Liu Xiaoqing didn't understand what he was talking about. The heat had dragged on for days, and the supplies were now worth their weight in gold, and she didn't know where he'd gotten them all from. He showed how to eat a delicious lunch and wash it down with cold soda, which quenches the heat so much. Chen Xiao pointedly took a bite of the fish. Xiaoqing recognized the salmon immediately, and I began to dream of eating the same food. Chen Xiao asked if she had enough food. She confessed that she was very scared to be here alone, and she always has the feeling that she is being watched. Liu Xiaoqing offered to stay with him for a couple of days, offering to keep him company. Chen Xiao grinned as he realized how cheap she was, having already fallen for the expensive food. He explained that it was going to get even hotter soon, and it was not worth going out again, especially since she always said that a girl should not tell her address and never let him in. Chen Xiao asked for the address, intending to pick her up in the evening. Liu Xiaoqing pretended that they were very old words, expecting protection from him, and sent him the address. Chen Xiao asked her to wait patiently for him without running away. She thought that he had fallen for her bait, being the same simpleton. In fact, Chen Xiao had already seen how willing she was to let him in for a simple piece of food, even though she was arrogant and unapproachable before. He immediately looked around when he heard knocking sounds. It was a woman knocking, asking him to open it. Chen Xiao walked to the door. He opened it, recognizing Aunt Wang, not understanding what had happened. She looked into his apartment, feeling the coolness from there, but her air conditioner broke, and her grandson is almost fainting from the heat. Aunt Wang started talking her teeth into him to come in and cool off a little. Chen Xiao recalled how as a child, he and his mother collected plastic bottles, and she pointed her finger in their faces and insulted them, so she also kicked them out by the security guards, and now she remembered about their neighborhood. He was caught up in the memory of Aunt Wang kicking them out. She tried to explain that it was a long time ago. She started screaming again, trying to make him feel guilty and decent. Chen Xiao decided not to talk any further and reminded her that at least he had air conditioning and closed the door in her face. She continued to pound on the door, insulting his parents and himself. The system was collecting her rage. Chen Xiao stood outside the door with a grim face. And later I started changing SIM cards in my phone. After that, he took the phone in his hand. He dialed the number of the Okian gang. Chen Xiao immediately admitted that he had Liu Xiaoqing's address and called her an easy target, who lived alone. He went out onto the balcony thinking about Xiaoqing, and I knew that the show was finally starting. Liu Xiaoqing, meanwhile, was preening herself in front of the mirror, intending to come to Chen Xiao's place soon and enjoy the air conditioning. She sat down on the bed, and she imagined him bringing everything to her feet, and she continued to live a carefree and easy life. Xiaoqing lay down on the bed and lit a cigarette. At this moment, very loud bangs came from the door. She immediately opened it, assuming it was Chen Xiao, and was already laughing at how he was trying to please her. But at this moment, her eyes were filled with fear and shock. The men from the gang were standing outside the door, and she didn't know how they'd found her address. He slapped her across the face and walked into the apartment, reminding her that the debt she owed was due to expire today. Liu Xiaoqing reminded her that it wasn't her who took out the debt, but Chen Xiao, so we need to look for him. He showed her in the face the contract that she herself signed, and now she is obliged to pay. The boss ordered his subordinates to search the place and find something valuable. Liu Xiaoqing made a dash to call Chen Xiao to come over immediately, thinking it was a mistake, while the men started smashing up her apartment. Later, the boss sat down on the sofa, and in front of him were the most expensive things. Liu Xiaoqing looked at him with a frightened face, but the boss didn't think these things were valuable because they can't even cover the interest. They reminded me that they had come here in the heat of hell, and now they couldn't leave empty-handed. The men stood in front of her as she tried to explain that Chen Xiao had all the money. She told him that he had a lot of supplies and would come to rescue her soon. Liu Xiaoqing asked them to wait a bit to get their money back. When she tried to call Chen Xiao, the caller was unavailable. And so it was with every attempt. She clutched the phone in her hands as it rang endlessly. Xiaoqing realized that he wasn't picking up the phone, but she didn't understand how it was possible, and her eyes filled with horror again. She was nervous, begging to wait to get through. The boss knocked the phone out of her hands, making it clear that she had just been sold and was now obligated to pay off his debt. Liu Xiaoqing stared at him with her mouth open in disbelief. They grabbed her by the hair as she begged to be released. Xiaoqing had sent them to Chen Xiao because that was all they needed. Her screams could be heard all over the house as they dragged her by the hair into the room. The door slammed shut. From there, I could only hear her screams as the phone lay on the ground and continued to ring. Chen Xiao sat at home and sipped wine while calls came to his phone. He was content to let Xiaoqing truly taste the passion of the apocalypse. Some time passed. The boss started to get dressed, while Xiaoqing lay on the bed and whimpered softly. He slammed the mug down on the table. He demanded information about Chen Xiao's supplies from her. Xiaoqing said that it has air conditioning, cold drinks, and plenty of food. And it was all in his home. She begged me to find him, explaining that she really didn't have anything. The boss roughly threw her back on the bed. He was interested in her story, and he felt like he had stumbled upon a big fish. He called his team to go to the target, and they left her house. Xiaoqing sat on the bed and cried with rage, tasting his deceit and wishing him a terrible death. A huge crowd was walking along the night road. Aunt Chen was leading a group of bandits, planning to use them to take revenge on Chen Xiao, who has air conditioning and a mountain of food. The man liked her information and was willing to repay her for it later. The old woman smiled, not surprised that he was the big boss. In her mind, she could already imagine Chen Xiao kneeling in front of him and giving Aunt Wang her apartment. They were already approaching the house. The boss noticed that the guy has a serious place, and they looked at his bunker. One of the bandits decided to show the boss how he could easily break down the door in one hit, but as he approached, he stepped on the laser, because of which he was immediately electrocuted. He fell unconscious, but everyone thought he was just having a seizure. One of them took him by the shoulder to lift him up, but they were all electrocuted nearby as they screamed in pain. Everyone stared at them with their mouths open and didn't understand what was going on. At this moment, a huge loudspeaker was heard on the roof of the house. They all couldn't understand what was going on, and the system picked up their emotions of puzzlement. Over the loudspeaker, someone wished them good luck, which brings joy and love. It continued to wish them luck as the crowd was electrocuted. The entire crowd realized that the entrance was electrocuted and disowned. The system continued to collect a lot of negative emotions of shock and panic. He sat at home and hummed quietly into the microphone, watching them from the cameras, glad that they immediately found the power grid. The boss was trying to order him to pay off his debts, even though his voice was shaking. Aunt Wang noticed that he had money for repairs, but not for the debt. He turned to them, explaining that his apartment cost 4 million. And that was enough to cover his debt of 3.5 million. But Chen Xiao reminded her that it was Xiao King's duty to go to her. The boss didn't know what to say, but supplies were important right now. They turned to him, advising him to disperse in a good way. But they continued to threaten that he should no longer look for problems. At this moment, he pressed the red button, and they were all electrocuted. The boys shouted that they couldn't take it anymore. The system collected their pain and despair. The boss watched the scene in horror, and they all started running away at once. But they promised to come back and not just leave it like that. Aunt Wang stared ahead in horror, not understanding what she was messing with. Now this house seemed like a hell of a building to her. The day came, and the temperature outside was over 50 degrees. But Chen Xiao had pure bliss, just lying on the sofa and eating delicious food under the air conditioner. The news reported urgent news about deaths in the region due to severe heat stroke. At that moment, his phone vibrated. In the chat, everyone started to humiliate Chen Xiao, thinking that he was cruel, that he enjoyed all the benefits on his own. The other neighbors began to support them, that at such moments they need to support and help each other. He leafed through the long complaints without interest. Thanks to this, the system caught their negative emotions of rage. Chen Xiao stood in front of his large refrigerator, full of food. I took a picture of him with a smile. He deliberately threw it into the general chat, pretending that he was ready to share, and everyone started begging him to help. But he wrote to them that he was not going to arrange a charity canteen for them, demanding an equivalent exchange. Everyone started insulting him again, since he didn't want to help them just like that and watch them suffer. He sighed and sat down on the sofa. At this moment, Chen Xiao noticed something. The system announced that negative emotion points had reached 3,000, and now he could improve the skill. It will be able to form the thinnest crack in the void, which can cut through any object upon contact. Chen Xiao was interested in this spatial slash. There was a red apple on the table, and he swung using the new ability, and the apple immediately split into two halves. He was getting more and more interested. Night had already fallen. Lu Xiaoqing got out of the red car in a smart dress. The boss was sitting inside smoking. He got out of the car and spoke to Xiao Zhang, who gave away Chen Xiao's location. Xiao Zhang confirmed that he was in the building at the back. Then the boss hugged Xiao Qing, and he asked her if she would feel sorry for him since he was her ex-boyfriend. Lu Xiaoqing swore that Brother Hai was the only man in her heart. Chen Xiao thought of it as just useless trash, and the two of them were ready to guarantee his death. At that moment, a silhouette appeared from behind the wall. It was Li Defu and another neighbor who were willing to give away Chen Xiao's location to be taught a lesson. The boss was pleased and was going to reward them with something afterward. Li Defu decided to show them a shortcut. On the street at this time, everyone was fighting for any resources. Li Defu looked around and was afraid. He saw that his store, which had become his home, was being robbed, but now it didn't belong to him. Everyone was horrified by the brutality of the bandits. Everyone was beaten up, and now they had no way to survive, as they had once trusted the bandits. The boss appeared in front of Chen Xiao's house. They were standing in a huge crowd. At that moment, he went outside and threw out an unnecessary chair, and I ate a piece of delicious steak. He sat down on a chair, wondering what they wanted. The boss was horrified by his game of cool and ordered him to hand over his supplies. Chen Xiao intelligently wiped his mouth with a cloth. He reminded me that it is not a matter of manners to interrupt a person while they are eating. The boss's eyes widened in shock. Rage filled him, and he ordered his men to seize him. But Chen Xiao deftly dodged every attack. Then he came face to face with one of the bandits, hitting him on the head with a plate and trampling him into the ground. One of them ran at him with a mace, but Chen Xiao kicked him first, knocking the weapon out of his hands. Someone swung an axe at him, and Chen Xiao realized that this was a good time to use the spatial slash. At that moment, an unknown grenade landed on the ground. A second later, it burst into a large puff of smoke, obscuring the view. The boss started coughing, realizing it was tear gas, and ordered everyone to retreat. The axe flew past and fell to the ground. At this moment, a voice came from behind that was surprised at his skills. Chen Xiao didn't know what he was doing here. It was Mu Chang who was holding the grenades and wanted to offer him something valuable. His eyes shone when he saw the cold water at this time of day. He gave him one bottle, but he still didn't understand why he was stepping into the wrong territory. Mu Ning confessed that Liu Haifeng was taking away his business, and he tracked him down for several days. And he had come here, so Mu Kang was following him, and the boss at target was Chen Xiao. He noticed that supplies were now in short supply, but he noticed more of the quantity, knowing that such a thing could not be achieved without connections. Chen Xiao realized that he was trying to dig up something. I asked him directly what he was implying. Mu Wang didn't want to mind his own business, but Liu Haifeng is currently buying up and hiding a huge amount of pure water, and he would like to team up with Chen Xiao and take it away. He knew his clandestine targets by heart, offering to do the mining while he did the selling. Chen Xiao pondered, realizing that in this heat, water would really be the most important currency, and offered to work together. But I set conditions that it takes 90%. Mu Cheng was shocked by the percentages. The system recorded his negative emotions. Chen Xiao refused to discuss everything further if he didn't agree. Mu Yang grabbed his leg, begging him to take at least 20%. He knew that Chen Xiao was too confident, so he had a trump card up his sleeve, and he was the only one suitable for this case. Chen Xiao had agreed to his terms, but now if he had a new product, he would first have to leave him the choice and only sell the leftovers. Mu King sighed but agreed. Chen Xiao set the first step. They needed to make a map for strengthening and distributing personnel. They arrived at the site, and Mu Kung showed him the site where Liu Haifeng's base of operations was located. People who were thirsty paid a fortune or exchanged things. Men with guns were walking around the base. On the other side was a group of girls who were being held for special services. Among them, Liu Xiaoqing was also standing there. Beyond this was a water storage area, but the exact location was not yet clear. Chen Xiao decided to sneak in, and if something happened, Mu Cheng would need to set up a diversion. He was shocked that the guy decided to go there alone. He promised that he had his own ways and went on the mission. After a while, Chen Xiao walked through the territory. But at that moment, a man with a gun called out to him from behind, asking for his card. He showed him a map, explaining that the boss had sent him to check the water supply. The man, of course, did not believe it. Chen Xiao thought that he had only used spatial slash to cut apples, but now he wanted to use it on another item, so he put his hand on his shoulder. At this moment, he used an ability and cut it open. The man collapsed to his knees and was wheezing in pain. His blood gushed out. As he fell, another bandit appeared behind him. He pointed the gun at the enemy, but Chen Xiao deftly dodged all the bullets and used spatial slash again. The man was simply cut in half. Everyone immediately came to the sounds of fighting, and a huge crowd of bandits appeared. But while they were running, Chen Xiao hid behind the wall. At that moment, a hand appeared out of the darkness. Chen Xiao turned around in fear. The bandits were walking around the water storage area looking for it. It was Li Yu who asked him to be quiet. Chen Xiao didn't expect to meet her here. It turned out that it had been stolen, and she thought that the same thing had been done to him. He started asking if he knew where the water supply was stored. Li Yu said that she was forced to clean the vaults, so she memorized the path. The two of them looked at the bucket, and they threw it in the direction of the bandits to distract attention. Everyone immediately rushed in the direction of the noise. But they had already escaped, and Li Yu led him to the side where there were no cameras. They crept cautiously past the garages. Chen Xiao ordered her to find a place to hide and wait for him. At this moment, he used his ability. He put his hand to the wall. His power began to crack the wall into pieces, and in one moment it completely ruptured. One of the bandits was terrified. Not understanding what had happened, Chen Xiao gave him an eerie look. He quickly cut it in half. He didn't even have time to make a sound. Li Yu noticed that he had been gone for a long time, so she stopped by to check. The entire water warehouse was ablaze. She ran inside trying to find him, and in the midst of the smoke, she saw a silhouette. Out of fear, Li Yu swung the brick, but there was only Chen Xiao in front of her. He ordered them to leave. A gun appeared in his hands, and he shot up into the sky. The shot exploded like fireworks. Mu Kang immediately noticed the sign and was surprised that Chen Xiao actually managed to do it. At this point, he brought a whole carload of Molotov cocktails and quickly threw them off the roof down. They set fire to the main base, and everyone was trying to evacuate. They were ordered to run away from the bomb. Chen Xiao and Li Yu were calmly leaving the place over the rooftops. At that moment, he noticed something. He was suddenly hugged by Liu Xiaoqing, who begged him to take her with him. He looked at her, and she reminded him of their relationship. Xiaoqing begged him to get her out of here, and then she wouldn't blame him for using her. Chen Xiao scoffed at her because she didn't understand what was going on. Xiaoqing continued to cry, not knowing what to say. She was forced to serve men every day. And if she refused, they dragged her back, and she really didn't have a place to go. So she begged to be taken with her, and she would do anything for it. Chen Xiao reminded her of how she laughed at his poverty and called him a loser, how she cheated on him, and how she helped Haifeng kill him. He looked into her eyes, and they were filled with shock. He had a picture in his head of being killed. In her previous life, she had torn him to pieces, and she didn't know that she would end up like this later. She looked down on him while he was being killed. Chen Xiao pushed her to the floor, considering her pathetic. He abruptly ordered Li Yu to move on. She watched Xiaoqing leave. Liu Xiaoqing was angry that he was so heartless and decided to kill everyone. The system detected hatred that was going through the roof. Everyone was trying to find water supplies that should have been intact. The boss rushed inside the vault, but inside everything was burned. On the wall was an inscription with a threat that promised to take her life after the water. He screamed in rage, not knowing who had done it. Lu Xiaoqing was on her knees admitting that Chen Xiao did it, and when she tried to stop him, he beat her up. She pretended that Chen Xiao was covering up the boss with insults. She hugged him. She said he was going to kill them all. The boss ordered everyone to run to the south gate so as not to miss the freak. The boys watched from afar, surprised by the commotion. But as they stood there, a huge crowd of bandits appeared in front of them, along with the boss. He rubbed his beard as he looked at him. Chen Xiao was surprised that they didn't waste even a minute. The bandits were given orders to capture them, but Chen Xiao just threw the torch forward, and they were surrounded by a huge wall of fire. Boss Lu shouted with all his might, swearing that he would kill him. The system could feel the hatred that filled his entire body. Chen Xiao thanked him for such vivid emotions. His emotion score reached 3,000, and he received a new skill called Spatial Barrier. After a while, they arrived home. Mu Chang was exulting with happiness that Chen Xiao was so cool. They set a sumptuous table while Mu Chang rejoiced as they wiped Haifeng's nose. There was meat, vegetables, and hot broth on the table. Li Yu sincerely thanked him for everything because she thought that she wouldn't last in that hell. Chen Xiao didn't expect her to thank him. They were classmates, and he was willing to help her. Thanks to him, she still believed that there were still people who were trustworthy. Mutanga wondered at their story of saving the beauty. He wanted to know how Chen Xiao had done this. Chen Xiao cleared out the entire warehouse by himself and brought a whole supply of water. The whole room abruptly filled with eggplants of water, but he did not reveal his secrets, advising to think about its storage. Mu Jing was shocked, not expecting such a large number. He started asking Li Yu about her life after graduation. It turned out that after graduation, her family experienced grief. At this point, she fell silent. In the flashback, Li Yu went to the house, but her parents weren't there. They both disappeared at the same time. The guys were shocked by what they heard. At that moment, flames appeared outside the window. Everything was on fire outside. All the streets were covered in flames as they watched from the balcony. The cameras showed how the bandits threw bombs at the house and how everyone screamed, begging to be saved. Mudong immediately understood Haifeng's handiwork, not understanding what he wanted to achieve. Li Yu didn't know what to do. Chen Xiao pondered, realizing that he wanted to make him take pity by killing innocents. But he was no longer the same saint from his previous life who was strangled by his own conscience. Haifeng wanted to see how long he could stay at home while he burned the block to the ground. Everyone was praising his ingenious plan that would allow them to burn people while others would suffocate from the smoke. The boss was sure that he would not be defeated. He wanted Chen Xiao to pay the price. All the houses around the street were ablaze. Muging didn't want to let it go because they would eventually die from lack of air as well. Chen Xiao just smiled. But he had foreseen this situation by building a shelter with a first-class fire extinguishing system. He pressed the red button. And from his house, everything began to pour water. Banks also began to fly from there. Inside them was a nano aerogel that quietly extinguished everything around it. Munang was pleasantly shocked that he had such technology. Li Yu also looked at him with a surprised face. The boss watched as the fire gradually died down, and I felt resistance from it. Therefore, the bandits continued to throw bombs at everything, and all the streets continued to burn. The boss was ordering them to continue, believing that Chen Xiao couldn't handle it. But he was informed of a lack of fuel, and the white gel does not allow the fire to spread. He picked up the speaker again. Chen Xiao turned to Boss Lu, telling him to go inside for a glass of ice water. The system grabbed his emotions violently. The boss changed his mind about just killing Chen Xiao. His house was completely resistant, fortified, and completely self-contained, so he wanted this shelter. Since brute force didn't work and the fire attacks failed, he decided to tear apart what little civilization they had left. The neighbors' hands were tied as they screamed in fear. Chen Xiao held the loudspeaker in his hands, not going to back down. All the neighbors sat tied up at Boss Lu's place while he waited for Chen Xiao to come out. They were already crying and blaming him for making the boss angry, and now they were suffering. Mudong clenched his fist in anger at Haifeng, intending to break out and smash him to smithereens. Chen Xiao wasn't going to fall for his manipulation of the hostages. The boss realized that there was no reaction coming from Chen Xiao, so he took the old man to deal with him in front of their eyes. He recognized Grandpa Wang immediately. Chen Xiao recalled how Uncle Wang had tried to save him. He tensed. He ordered Mu Kang to stay behind and protect Li Yu while he talked to Boss Lu and settled his debts. Chen Xiao opened the door and walked out. He appeared at Haifeng's side, ordering him not to implicate other people in their grievances. The boss was overjoyed when he finally saw him appear. He wondered how Chen Xiao was acting like a hero and ordered that the debt and water be paid back. Chen Xiao grinned at his jokes, but he wasn't interested in heroism. He considered the senseless slaughter to be just boredom and a bad thing for karma, and he had heard that Haifeng had made a fortune from the casino, so he suggested a bet. If he won, he would give up all of his possessions, and if he lost, he would let old man Wang go and get out of the area. Haifeng laughed, but he still took out the dice cup from his pocket. He tossed it in Chen Xiao's direction, intending to consider the one with the higher bid as the winner. Chen Xiao caught the goblet deftly and immediately put on more. They faced off against each other, declaring a duel. Haifeng started stirring the dice with a businesslike air, and Chen Xiao responded. They started shouting with rage and excitement. At the same time, they set the goblets on the table. At that moment, he pressed the button on his goblet, and all the dice inside turned into sixes. When he raised the cup, all of his subordinates were cheering for the boss. Victory. But Chen Xiao asked me not to jump to conclusions. At this moment, he used a spatial slash. He picked up the goblet, which was filled only with sliced cubes. Chen Xiao pretended that their dice were of poor quality, while the boss and his accomplices opened their mouths in shock. All the neighbors were horrified that the cubes were cut in half. Thanks to this, Chen Xiao's dice score reached 21, which significantly beat Haifeng. Therefore, he immediately ordered the release of the hostages. The boss gritted his teeth in anger, not knowing what to say. He was abruptly shocked that Chen Xiao had dared to cheat. The system gathered his rage. He ran at him with a dagger, intending to finish him off. Everyone quickly closed their eyes to avoid looking at it. But Chen Xiao only smiled, thinking that this was the perfect time to test a new skill. He deftly dodged the blow. At that moment, a grenade landed behind him. She fell to the ground, and everything was filled with smoke. His subordinates were trying to pull the boss out of the smoke. When they found him, he immediately ordered them to go after him and kill him. But there was no need to look for him, as Chen Xiao was standing in the same spot. Haifeng immediately pointed his finger at him, telling them to grab him. He ordered them to shoot. But while they were shooting, one of them was pierced in half by something. And then the second one, right in front of the boss. Chen Xiao stood like a statue. Haifeng didn't care and aimed the warhead at him to finally kill him. He shot him, telling him to die. But his projectile stopped the shield that was Chen Xiao's new skill. A spatial barrier surrounded him. The warhead collided with the shield and shattered into pieces. Haifeng couldn't believe his eyes. He was terrified that Chen Xiao was able to stop the missile. Chen Xiao mocked him, humiliating him that he was losing in front of so many people. I assumed that he would decline their bet. At this moment, he chopped the warhead into several pieces with a single wave of his hand. He walked towards Haifeng with a calm gait. He dropped his weapon in fear and tried to step back. Chen Xiao reported that Haifeng was not in a position to bargain. Inwardly, Boss Lu knew that Chen Xiao wasn't that simple. He explained that the boss had already run into trouble when he overstepped his bounds, and it was time to settle the score. Haifeng knew that his ammo was low, and now the war would be considered suicide. But Chen Xiao was a walking treasure with such a secret hideout. He thought that it would be worth trying to drag him in to recoup his losses. He made a sharp, pained face, and his eyes sparkled as he called their argument a misunderstanding and suggested that they get to know each other better and negotiate. He got down on his knees and started offering his help in survival. Haifeng confided about his stock of medicines, which were very valuable in their time, and offered to share in half. Chen Xiao looked thoughtful. I put my hand on his shoulder, taking his words as an argument. But he whispered that he had more shelters and more supplies than he thought. Haifeng grinned, thinking that pills would be more important than food, so he suggested teaming up because he knew the code for the abandoned warehouse. Chen Xiao accepted his agreement. He announced that today's incident would end here. Haifeng agreed with him, considering it all a simple misunderstanding. He sent him home, intending to discuss the terms another day. All of his subordinates didn't understand what was going on, but he just ordered us to leave. Chen Xiao watched the entire crowd walk away. He reminded me that the code wouldn't be able to stop him because he would just break down the door. Later, Chen Xiao approached Uncle Wang and promised that everyone would leave. Aunt Wang looked on indignantly. Her mouth dropped open in fear. His uncle sincerely thanked him for saving him and promised to help. He explained that he was too old to fight on the front lines, but he could still do small jobs for him. Chen Xiao appreciated his intentions, but sent him home to rest. Night fell and a red moon covered the street. The boss and his company were walking home, and they were all saying how afraid they were of dying at the hands of this Chen Xiao. Haifeng considered him naive, thinking that Chen Xiao believed in their deal. He decided to just stall for time and play along, and when he got to his supplies, he would kill him. The bandits all thought that the boss was a genius, and they were sure that Chen Xiao couldn't handle them. But Haifeng still saw something strange about it, seeing that it couldn't even be hit by artillery shells. He ordered one of them to check Chen Xiao's background. But at this moment, Haifeng's neck was severed. Everyone was shocked, but they were going to run. Haifeng's body was still lying in the alley. It was Chen Xiao who was standing on the roof and killed him. He formally said goodbye to Boss Lu. There was an emergency alert on the news about a global heat crisis that was out of control, and now the ecosystem was on the verge of collapse. Authorities have officially advised residents to either migrate north to government shelters or stay put and wait for rescue. Chen Xiao knew that this shelter in the north would soon turn into purgatory, and being saved was just an illusion. The true nightmare was just beginning, and very soon there will be heat-resistant mutant beasts that will devour everything that civilization has created. And the awakened ones will appear among the people, but they will also divide into factions in the struggle for resources and begin to destroy each other. Therefore, Chen Xiao wasn't just going to protect the shelter. He wanted to turn it into the last bastion of survival in this apocalypse. At this point, neighbors on the street continued to shout and announce that they were starving to death and their homes were burned down. They knew that he had snatched up a beautiful shelter with all his needs, and he didn't even dare share it. The crowd started knocking on his door, reminding him that it was his fault they were in this situation. They had decided that the shelter should be shared, and now they were going to take turns living inside. At this time, Chen Xiao was quietly listening to music and preparing breakfast for himself. He snapped a picture of his fresh steak, and I threw it in a group chat to make everyone jealous. The system collected feelings of envy and rage. Chen Xiao was grinning at their useless sense of rage. The neighbors gasped in shock and anger. He threw the phone in the ground, intending to kill it if he didn't want to cooperate. Chen Xiao was going to leave the house to investigate, and he would go to the warehouse in the Western District. But when he came out, he was met by a strong wind. When Chen Xiao looked up, a cleaver was already flying in front of his face. He stiffened abruptly. I dodged him smartly so that he crashed into the door. All the neighbors jumped on him with knives, intending to kill him. But he wasn't afraid, and he lunged back at him. He grabbed the man's wrist. He twisted the man's arm sharply, causing him to cry out in pain. At this moment, Chen Xiao took the cleaver from his hand. I aimed for his arm, but he was interrupted by another guy who also rushed to kill him. Chen Xiao focused. With a couple of moves, he cut down several people at once, and they fell to the ground dead. The guy fell upside down and almost broke his head. Chen Xiao started threatening him with a cleaver, and the guy reminded him that he had just started a robbery in the middle of the day, but the system easily detected his incredible fear. He realized that the guy was afraid of death, but Chen Xiao didn't even want to get his hands dirty. He just felt that killing him now would be too easy a task. Now in this heat, everyone is catching infections, necrosis, and sepsis, so you can just wait a couple of days until he dies in agony. Chen Xiao went to a warehouse in the Western District. I stood right in front of the garage, but there was a camera above the door. He used a slash in one motion and cut through her lens. Then Chen Xiao used the same ability to make a passage in the garage door. And he began to creep slowly, so as not to be seen by anyone. A strange green gas greeted him inside. He immediately started coughing, realizing that he was poisoned. Chen Xiao realized that this was originally a trap. Silhouettes appeared behind him. Chen Xiao sensed it, but he didn't have time to react. How a man in a gas mask injected him with an unknown substance through a syringe, and a strange feeling immediately came over him. They turned to him, asking about his state of health. The gas was non-lethal, but the impact was quite unpleasant. It turned out that they injected him with medicine and helped him. Chen Xiao assumed it was security, but Haifeng didn't say anything about it. The man introduced himself as Lin Guodong and was a biomedical researcher. He explained that his work focuses on studying human evolution under extreme conditions and introduced his work to student Su Rue. The girl greeted him. Lin Guodong explained that the gas outside was a safety measure, but he was interested in the tool Chen Xiao used to cut. He thanked him for saving him, but he became interested in his profession. Together, they went to his lab. There was a dinosaur skeleton standing there. Chen Xiao was sure that this wasn't an ordinary medical office. Lin Guodong offered something to honor the apology for their security arrangements, or a welcome gift. Chen Xiao went into their fridges to get something. He began stuffing various medications into his briefcase. He thanked him for his generosity, and they watched Chen Xiao leave the warehouse. Lin Guodong smiled, knowing that they would meet again. Dawn began to break. Chen Xiao returned home and closed the door. He sighed, not expecting Professor Lin to save him and not cause any trouble. But he still got goosebumps from the dark look in his eyes. A message was sent to the neighbors' chat, where one of the neighbors asked for antibiotics or hemostatic agents for double the price. Chen Xiao was only able to get a couple of packs. They are quite effective, but he wasn't going to sell them. Everyone was still insulting Chen Xiao, who wasn't going to share the supplies. He immediately reached into his briefcase, and abruptly from something came in shock. A small paper clip appeared on the briefcase. It was obviously a tracking beacon. He peeled it off, not knowing who might have done it or when, and I realized that someone wanted to play cat and mouse. At that moment, he looked down, and I saw a white cat who was sneaking around. Chen Xiao attached a tracker to it so that it would help him, and I asked the cat to go to the place where she usually likes to wander. The cat quickly ran to another place. The map showed all the erratic movements of the beacon. Lin Guodong couldn't understand what exactly was going on and what Chen Xiao was doing. He flipped through the phone, where a man begged someone to bring medicine because his brother was dying, and another asked to bring her child clean water, intending to exchange anything. Chen Xiao recalled this pity game and knew how, in her previous life, she had used the same methods to get people's handouts. In the neighborhood chat, everyone wondered at his inhumanity, how he could watch people die and sit around with full supplies. Chen Xiao absolutely didn't care about other people's children, and in their eyes, he looked like a devil. Hypocrisy and moral blackmail no longer affected him. He texted a neighbor named Wang Wei in the general chat, noticing how she was dragging boxes of water. The girl was shocked, realizing that he put cameras even in the corridor. Wang Wei thought that she was being quite careful, but she still got caught in the frame. The neighbors rebelled and couldn't believe that she was hiding so much water. Men with guns appeared outside her door and immediately began to break it with an axe. Wang Wei screamed in fear. They demanded to take out all the food and water, and he threatened that they might then go to extreme measures. The men had poor Wang Wei cornered. They began to sort through all her boxes like animals. Other neighbors also followed them and stole everything under the guise of noise. Wang Wei could only sit there covered in bruises and watch her precious supplies drain away. Tears were pouring from her eyes. One of the guys died right in the entrance, and they tearfully said goodbye to him. People weren't going to leave it here, or it would start to rot and infect them. Lin Guodong asked people not to panic and stay calm. He introduced himself as the medical team from the city's Center for Disease Control and explained that they wanted to help. Lin Guodong understood that they had been through a lot, but he understood that due to the blocked roads, they had arrived too late. But he could still get the situation under control, intending to subject the bodies to professional sanitation. Otherwise, an epidemic will break out, and the consequences will be unimaginable. He gave them some disinfectant pills and basic medicines. The supplies were limited, so they needed to be used wisely. The people thanked their savior. People were sure that the state had not forgotten about them. Lin Guodong knew that Chen Xiao's signal had ended here, and he couldn't have gone far yet. From the window, Chen Xiao noticed that people were gathered in one place. I saw Professor Lin and his student among them, not understanding what he was doing here. He deduced that it was Lin Guodong who was tracking him. At that moment, his phone vibrated. He received a message from an unknown person who advised him to beware of the doctor. Chen Xiao didn't know who exactly sent this message, but at this moment, he noticed something. He looked up at the roof. An unknown person placed a telescope there and watched him through it. Chen Xiao tensed up. He looked up. He knew that other people were watching him too. When Chen Xiao tried to call this number, but it was a virtual number, Chen Xiao realized that his watcher was very good at hiding. He didn't know if this was a real warning or an attempt to use it to get rid of Professor Lin. Everyone was truly thanking the professor for such help in this heat. Lin Guodong said that it was his duty, but advised to be more attentive to the heat, and if you feel unwell, immediately contact him. Chen Xiao watched them with a tense face. He noticed the strange spots on his coat that looked like blood. But it also looks like dried chemicals. Chen Xiao recalled that in his previous life, after the heat wave began, medical teams appeared in some areas, and under the pretext of preventing epidemics, they took blood samples from residents. But after that, the strongest survivors began to disappear. Lin Guodong started putting up ads saying that a free medical checkup point would be open starting tomorrow. They will be given a basic examination, wound treatment, and vitamin and nutritional supplements. Each participant received a bottle of water as a gift. All the people read this and wondered what kind of saint Professor Lin was. In the courtyards, the cat was happy with canned food. Lin Guodong was the one who solved the mystery of why the signals from the beacon were so chaotic. He stroked it, noticing how the cat was enjoying the feast. At this point, suspicious syringes were seen in the coat. Lin Guodong concluded in a strange voice that Chen Xiao had been able to find his tracker after all, and was disappointed. Chen Xiao was peeking at him from behind. Now he had no doubt that Lin Guodong had done it. People gathered in the underground parking lot. Everyone was trying to deal with the heat in their own ways, and everyone couldn't wait for the rain to come and get cooler. Professor Lin examined the citizens, asking them about their health problems. Chenda said that nothing had bothered him lately. Chen Xiao, wearing a hood, was watching the inspection of the people, but no one understood why the professor was taking their blood. Lin Guodong explained that she would go for a routine analysis. Chen Xiao wanted to know his true purpose. At this moment, he was called out loudly. The boys were dragging their brother, who had an infected wound and urgently needed help. Lin Guodong took out an unknown cone, and he described it as a broad-spectrum remedy that can speed up wound healing and fight infection. They immediately administered the drug intravenously. The professor asked him to rest for the next couple of days, and then healing will take place quickly. The guy thanked him for his help, but at this moment his eyes dimmed. Both boys noticed something fishy about him. They left the infirmary, but there was still something wrong with my brother. The boy cringed with a terrible searing pain in his bones. At this moment, his blood vessels began to burst apart, and his face was also covered with various blood vessels. It suddenly exploded as if it had been pierced by energy. No one could figure out what had happened to Abu. He suddenly grabbed his own brother by the neck, as if he was possessed by a monster, and Bu started choking him, while his brother tried to talk some sense into him. He remembered how his own brother had thrown him out of hiding, and he felt hurt, so he threw it on the ground like trash. Abu screamed when he heard the strange sounds. Suddenly, Chen Xiao appeared in front of him. The Abu monster chased after him, but Chen Xiao was able to dodge it. He noticed that his strength had increased at least 3 times, but his joints were stiff and his attack trajectory was straight. He knew that this was not a normal reaction to the drug. Abu decided to attack him again, but Chen Xiao used the ability to finish it off. I aimed my hand at it. Chen Xiao drew a spatial slash across it. The incision went down Abu's neck. He fell to the ground dead, tears streaming down from his eyes. The alley fell silent, but there was only the sound of shoes. Lin Guodong didn't understand why the signal disappeared again, because he had built a nanolocator into his serum, and there shouldn't have been a malfunction. At that moment, he stopped abruptly and his face twisted in shock. There were 2 guys lying on the ground. He handed Abu a clipboard and started shining it for inspection. Lin Guodong found out that the prototype caused neural collapse due to overstimulation, but it couldn't be a direct cause of death. I put my fingers to the wound on his neck. He remembered finding Haifeng's body, and the wounds matched perfectly, and the same cut was made on the lock in the door, completely smooth and precise. Lin Guodong tensed up, but he knew that an ordinary person couldn't cut through matter like this without some external technique. He immediately remembered Chen Xiao and had no doubt that he was an anomaly and was not mistaken. Chen Xiao had the answers he needed. At this moment, Zhang Qian woke up and cleared his throat. Lin Guodong had asked him to sit still because of his serious injury. He smiled when he saw the professor standing in front of him. He wanted to know what had happened to his brother Abu, but Lin Guodong only expressed his condolences for the loss and showed Chen Xiao a picture, assuring him that it was all his fault. Lin Guodong wanted to know where he had gone, intending to find him to find out the truth. Zhang Qian was surprised because he knew Chen Xiao's exact address. He reassured him that he was going to send him off for immediate professional help and invited him to his lab. I told him to stay there until he got better. The guy sincerely thanked his savior. They went to his lab. Zhang Qian wanted to know how Abu had turned into that monster in just a minute after taking the vaccine. He remembered with horror how his brother could barely walk. Lin Guodong called it an extreme physiological serum rejection reaction, which was very rare, and suggested that he conduct a full diagnosis to ensure better treatment. They arrived at the quarantine monitoring room while the guy didn't understand anything. He decided that it was better to go home and just rest, drinking antibiotics. The professor beeped his entry card, but he was already being wheeled in a wheelchair, and Lin Guodong ordered him to shut up. Zhang Qian started shouting, not wanting to go with them. His eyes widened in horror as he realized where he was, but the room's doors had already closed. Chen Xiao was lying on the sofa. He wondered what Lin Guodong might be up to. At this moment, something happened. The doorbell rang, and on the intercom camera, it was Lin Guodong. He was surprised that Chen Xiao actually lived in this house and apologized for the late visit. Lin Guodong said that tonight it was unbearably stuffy and the sky was overcast. The door slowly opened. Chen Xiao wanted to know what the professor wanted. Lin Guodong said that he just came to check on him. It was now clear that he had tracked him down and had come much earlier, so this was a good opportunity to find out what he was up to. The professor said flatly that he hadn't expected such an early meeting. He sat down at the sofa, appreciating its unusual home. He immediately noticed the double-insulated, double-glazed windows, the autonomous water filtration system, and the house looked more like a bunker. Lin Guodong assumed that Chen Xiao knew about the heat apocalypse beforehand. Chen Xiao explained that he just bought a repair package at a sale and was sworn to be reliable. It turned out that the professor had come to ask a question. He told me that his neighbor Ba was dead, and Haifeng, who had caused him so much trouble, was also dead. The professor examined both bodies, and on each, the cervical vertebrae were cut instantly, and the incisions were smooth like a laser. Chen Xiao smiled, knowing what he was getting at, but he turned on the fool, pretending that he was trying to get to the truth. He asked him to share this vendor's contacts if he found one. The professor didn't understand why he was doing this. Chen Xiao just wanted to cut the steaks well in this heat because the meat was getting tough. Lin Guodong tensed up, and the system recorded his suspicions. He deduced that both men were killed by the same person, someone with extremely specialized skills. Chen Xiao guessed that the two of them were just unlucky and had provoked something that wasn't necessary. The professor smiled, reminding him that Chen Xiao had conflicts with them. He didn't answer the question. But after a moment, I appreciated his joke, reminding him that he was a simple person and he could not have such skills. Chen Xiao noticed that there was no need to bring a medical bag. Moreover, Chen Xiao didn't give him his address and wanted to know how the professor found it. He showed him the phone, knowing that they knew each other because the guy gave him the address. Chen Xiao froze in shock. The photo showed Zhang Chen under the strange devices in poor condition, and it was clear that he was now with the professor. Lin Guodong explained that he had saved his life. He asked him how he was feeling with a worried face, while inside he was content with his game, not understanding how Zhang Qian managed to fall into the professor's clutches. Lin Guodong said that Zhang Qian is now adapting to a new therapy, where the human body evolves in high temperatures, and now he is one step ahead of others. Chen Xiao didn't expect that the professor was actually experimenting on humans and wanted to know his true purpose. Suddenly, Zhang Qian woke up. His eyes widened. He tore up all the instruments. They warned that vital signs are unstable, and the level of genetic mutation is 37%. The professor handed him a syringe with an immune booster of his design, which provides protection against various pathogens that occur during abnormal heat. Chen Xiao grinned because the color reminded him of blueberry soda. The professor was increasingly suspicious of him. He glanced at the syringe, and Lin Guodong knew that he wasn't a simple person. The professor knew that the heat wave would continue, and the human survival rate was less than 10%. But there were those who were destined to evolve. Chen Xiao grinned, hinting at Zhang Qian's evolution. Lin Guodong knew that experimentation required sacrifice, and it always required pioneers. But Chen Xiao was showing the ghosts of stable evolution, so the professor offered him cooperation to find the key to adapting humanity. He wanted to know what would happen if he refused. Lin Guodong didn't demand an answer right now, but he was threatening future infections, diseases, and monsters, so he insisted on becoming partners because his knowledge and technology would allow him to live a long life. The professor decided to leave him his serum and promised that the doors of his laboratory would always be open. He noticed that Chen Xiao had an ironclad psychological stability and protective instincts, which clearly indicated his characteristics. The professor wasn't going to miss it. Chen Xiao stared at the syringe, knowing that it was just experimenting on people, but presenting it as a good cause. He knew that he had to get rid of the professor, otherwise there would be no peace. Therefore, Chen Xiao was going to show him what the real evolution looked like. Zhang Qian's eyes went wild. He stood up abruptly and screamed like a wild animal. The professor's voice came through the speaker. He reported stable vital signs and the completion of a sequence of mutations. Lin Guodong considered negative emotions to be the best catalysts. He gave an order to the reborn Zhang Qiang to bring him Chen Xiao. Su Rui now understood that the path of human evolution was to turn humans into monsters. Lin Guodong asked her impressions of participating in the experiment for the first time since entering, and suggested that she activate it on her own. Su Rui was nervous, not feeling very good about experimenting on humans, which was definitely beyond a person's moral character. But the professor did not see the ethics of the apocalypse, which becomes a luxury, and one's sacrifice becomes an opportunity for survival for others. He pressed the button, releasing Zhang Qian. Zhang Qian growled while his muscles were strained due to the mutations. The professor was smiling wildly as he ordered him to bring Chen Xiao back alive. The monster broke out of its cage as if it had found a trail. Night fell. A mutated monster was jumping around the houses in search of a target. He landed in front of a house. I kept sniffing around to find it. At that moment, he turned around. Chen Xiao was standing by the tree, and he couldn't believe that it was the same Zhang Qian standing in front of him. He didn't even know whether to call him by his first name or just dog. The system was gathering his rage, and Zhang Qian lashed out at him, wishing for death. Chen Xiao noticed how his emotions became stronger after the mutation, and now his system gathering is even more efficient. He ran in the other direction, intending to find a place with more space. Chen Xiao didn't want to fight right outside his door, much less wake up the neighbors. The monster crawled through the underground parking lot like a dog. Chen Xiao abruptly jumped at him to show him his spatial gap. He patted him on the shoulder, but the skin was much thicker. Zhang Qian stiffened as he stared at him. Then he quickly charged at the target while Chen Xiao dodged. He continued to shower him with insults to collect his rage. Zhang Qian screamed in anger, but he couldn't do anything. The monster filled with rage and stopped in its tracks, something moving inside it. Chen Xiao noticed that something was wrong with him. He was abruptly shocked when he didn't see it. Suddenly, Chen Xiao turned around in horror. The monster was already behind him, and bone spikes shot out from under its skin. They shot Chen Xiao. The professor was thrilled that Zhang Qian was able to achieve a level 2 mutation that came from an emotional outburst. Su Rui was beginning to doubt that this was the way to save humanity. The monster was standing right in front of his face, Bones and spikes sprouted through his skin as he stared at his target. He sincerely wanted to kill Chen Xiao and pushed off from the ground. His hand attacked Chen Xiao, but he moved back, but he didn't have time to dodge the blow. So his claws grazed him lightly and he bled. The spatial gap continued to grow, but he was warned that the target's energy fluctuations continued to grow. Chen Xiao only had to wait a little longer. He continued to provoke him, from which the system collected his negative emotions. Zhang Chen started shouting, and Chen Xiao remembered how brave he used to be. But now it's only gotten cool because of a couple of shots. Zhang Chen didn't stop shouting. He explained that he was no different from a dog now that he was following the professor's orders. His anger grew at an incredible rate, and blood flowed out of his mouth. Lin Guodong was satisfied with his emotional output, which had already exceeded the critical threshold, and his bone density was increasing. He was happy that Chen Xiao was helping him stimulate the monster, and he was waiting for Zhang Chen's help. Surui didn't understand what Chen Xiao was doing. The monster began to tear apart when its body couldn't withstand the stimulation. Suddenly, it was covered by a shield and a bunch of bone spikes flew out of it. Chen Xiao noticed them immediately. I decided to dodge quickly. He bet that Zhang Chen wouldn't be able to approach him. The monster was bursting with anger. Negative emotions had reached their limit of 30,000, and now an artificial evolution was available to Chen Xiao. He immediately approved it. And Chen Xiao knew that this was the right moment. He used his ability and aimed it at the monster. A huge hole appeared that sucked in all of his bones. The monster gradually began to recede into space. Zhang Chen started to cry out, feeling his limbs die off. Chen Xiao just chuckled. He deftly removed the camera from the corpse's neck. He showed up on the professor's big screen and graded his test subject for a bad grade, advising them to send someone who could fight back next time. At this point, the connection was interrupted. Lin Guodong was angry with Chen Xiao, but a second later, a smirk appeared on her lips. He laughed madly, thinking Chen Xiao was a unique object and was going to catch him. Zhang Chen was lying down and bleeding profusely. Chen Xiao touched him and wanted to put him out of his misery. I didn't even expect a thank you. At that moment, the corpse disappeared from the floor. There were footsteps in the parking lot, and happy clapping with praise. Chen Xiao whirled around at the voice. The unknown man stopped in a pool of blood. Chen Shixin carefully pressed his nostrils to avoid smelling the smell of death, but he really enjoyed their battle, and he was sure that this era was meant for the ascension of the gods. Chen Xiao looked at him with a displeased face. Spatial holes were already forming in his hand. Shixin admired its destructive power, knowing that it was nothing like the defective products that Lin Guodong had created. Chen Xiao was surprised that he knew Professor Lin. He explained that he had come here to dissuade the professor from committing delusions. He was the one who sent that anonymous message. Chen Xiao was surprised, not knowing where the number came from. Shixin described the ARC faction, which has an extensive intelligence network, and it was easy for him to find anyone. He represented the ARC and came to invite Chen Xiao to join them, and they would be able to offer him true evolution. Chen Xiao was surprised that the Awakened Ones had appeared much earlier in this life. Shixin said that their mutation was completely different and not the same as Professor Lin's. They offered a comprehensive improvement that preserved both sanity and humanity. He wanted to know more about the ARC. It was an organization dedicated to finding Awakened Ones. They thought that the world was on the verge of a great upheaval, and now only the real elite could board the ARC of the new era. Shixin insisted on joining him, promising to give him something that Lin Guodong would never be able to. He wanted to make him stronger, and not by using ugly mutations, but to help him master true strength, passing the true path to divinity. Chen Xiao deduced that it was all just a crazy cult. Shixin didn't understand what he was talking about. In one motion, he sliced open the man's business card. Shixin was shocked, and Chen Xiao pretended that it was an accident. He despised all those who ordered him to live under someone's tune, and was not going to stand up to the hypocritical elite and go his own way. Chen Xiao was working alone, and he didn't need any guidance. Shixin watched him go, knowing that the guy wasn't that simple after all. He was even beginning to genuinely admire him. But now the world was collapsing, and a wild existence would only help you survive for a short time. Shixin promised that the doors of the Ark would always be open, and disappeared into thin air. The system gathered feelings of disdain, numbness, and surprise from him. Chen Xiao was surprised that he looked cold-blooded on the surface, but he still brought quite a few negative points. He tensed, intending to break those limits. But before that, he had some business with Lin Guodong, and it was time to settle the score with him. Later, he went to the lab and made one click. At the same time, the door began to split open from the spatial slash. When the doors collapsed, huge flasks of aliens appeared inside. Some of the flasks were filled with rotting corpses. It was now clear what Lin Guodong's great science dream looked like. He thought it best to burn the place down right away. The professor appeared in front of him and greeted him. Lin Guodong had expected him to come. After all, such a perfect paragon couldn't be content with an ordinary life. He understood that Jiang Chen had failed, but if he had reached Chen Xiao, then he had done well. The professor was glad that he had finally thought things through and was ready to sacrifice himself for humanity. Chen Xiao tensed up and became increasingly disgusted by his behavior. Lin Guodong laughed at the arc, thinking Shixin was a hypocrite who hid behind a holy robe. He explained that every real leap in human progress was achieved when people walked over corpses. Lin Guodong considered his power to be a gift from the heavens, and it wasn't worth wasting it on ordinary mortals. Chen Xiao was already tired of listening to his clamor, and he didn't care about the progress of humanity at all. He didn't care about Lin Guodong's pathetic experiments, but he had done one big stupid thing. He managed to disturb Chen Xiao's peace, so a black hole appeared in his hand, and he aimed it at Godin, intending to erase him. But the professor was prepared and considered it a naive act. He was originally prepared to force him to stay here and press the red button on the remote. Lin Guodong was sure that Chen Xiao had no strength left after the battle with Zhang Qiang and suggested that he submit to him immediately. Chen Xiao asked what would happen after the rejection. He pressed the button again to show the consequences. Suddenly, all the flasks cracked at once, and Chen Xiao looked forward over his hands. A crowd of monsters was already rushing at him. Lin Guodong was going to make it the next experiment. Chen Xiao dodged a single blow and immediately activated his abilities, sending slashes. He cut off the monster's limbs. The professor had ordered him to stay here forever. Chen Xiao doubted that all these monsters would be enough. But in my head, I knew that my strength was already running out, and I needed to deal with it faster. Monsters were leaping at him, and he cut one by one. At one point, he landed on the ground when he finished. Chen Xiao grinned as he thought that the professor should have had some tricks up his sleeve, but 3 monsters weren't enough. He began to approach him, thinking him naive. I was going to kill him right now. The professor was shocked. Abruptly, he fell to his knees. He abruptly admitted that Chen Xiao was strong, but he had already passed on all the data on the mutation serum. His neck was already cut and he was bleeding, but he had already sown the seeds and the world was getting more and more interesting. Chen Xiao stiffened and stared at him. He turned and started to walk away, but a voice came from behind, warning him that he wouldn't make it home in this state. Chen Xiao turned around abruptly, realizing that it was Lin Guodong's assistant who was speaking. She promised that she wouldn't hurt him. She handed him a restorative serum that would quickly stop the bleeding and stabilize the wounds. Chen Xiao stared at the cone in her hands in silence. She promised that the medicine is safe, and if it is not used, the wounds will fester. Chen Xiao didn't understand why he should just trust her, since Lin Guodong had just died and she was showing up with medicine, which was suspicious. She didn't blame him, but she still had something useful to do. She asked him to follow her if he still had the strength. She showed him the warehouse where the professor kept his supplies. Even though he devoted his life to science, he still feared death more than anyone else. He wouldn't need it, and she was going to leave this place, so she decided to give it all to Chen Xiao. Chen Xiao was surprised that she was leaving. The girl recalled how she applied to become a graduate student of a professor, considering him a real scientist. But I only recently learned about his experiments on humans, and even though she wasn't directly involved in them, she is still an accomplice. She was going to head to the research base in the north to continue the work she originally wanted to do. And if she can survive, she wants to develop a real cure, not some kind of poison. She started to leave, and they hoped that the next time they met, the world would be in a better state. The warehouse contained UV-protected clothing, antibiotics, and water purification pills. Chen Xiao created a black hole, realizing that it all belonged to him now. And he took everything he needed, not going to leave this place just like that. The warehouse abruptly caught fire. Some time passed and Chen Xiao was already at home. Outside, the temperature reached 58 degrees. It was reported that the Global Meteorological Administration issued another red warning. On Earth, permafrost has completely melted, releasing huge amounts of methane, and now the greenhouse effect has entered an irreversible vicious cycle. People were lying in the streets from the terrible heat, not knowing when the nightmare would end. Chen Xiao adjusted the temperature. The system announced that he didn't have enough points for negative emotions, so the amount of spatial storage can't be improved yet. He had enough supplies for now, but the conditions outside were getting harsher, so he needed to strengthen his strength. Now, the most important currency is water, and it is ideal for collecting emotion. He wrote to Mukung, asking him about selling water. He had already run out of supplies, so he was going to take some goods. In the evening, Chen Xiao wondered what kind of hidden place he had chosen. When they came to the water exchange meeting, Chen Xiao priced the item at 2 bottles of water, but Chen Xiao decided not to act like the right guy, so he lowered the price by 1 bottle. The customer was angry, but Chen Xiao was provoking him to negative emotions. The system was gathering the man's rage, and Chen Xiao raised the price again. The man thanked him as he was ordered to say, Chen Xiao praised him and advised him to bring more goods next time. Later, he met up with Uncle Wang. He said that Liu Yun's aunt from a nearby compound was raising her grandson alone, and the child had suffered heat stroke. Water and electricity were constantly out of order, and she couldn't handle herself, so Uncle Wang was going to bring Ye Yi some water. Chen Xiao advised to take care of yourself first, because water becomes very precious. Uncle Wang knew that he was old and had lived long enough, and he couldn't bear to watch the child suffer. When he brought her the water, my aunt thanked him more sincerely. But when he left, she blamed him for bringing only 2 miserable bottles and decided to cry harder tomorrow so that she could shake the whole crate out of him. My aunt crossed the cage and knocked on the door of the next apartment. Xiao Chang opened the door, not knowing what brought her here. She handed him the water as payment for the day, and he accepted it immediately. Murang looked at the phone and felt that something was wrong. He received a message that the transaction was canceled and the person stopped trading. Chen Xiao couldn't help but guess that the next deal was canceled. Muding had the feeling that they were specially chosen for the purpose of... At this moment, a commotion was heard in the intersection. A huge crowd of guys appeared in front of him. Chen Xiao thought that they were looking for him. They ordered him not to sell water secretly, thus they put people on the vile commercial water. And he believed that Chen Xiao was a heavy sinner. He didn't understand what was wrong with that, or why the water had suddenly turned nasty, assuming they were drinking urine. The boys immediately felt ashamed of his joke. They were followers of the pure water sect, and the water that the masses accumulate was a byproduct of the depletion of the Earth's resources. Only by drinking water that was purified by Lord Zhao Qiang did they not increase their sins. Therefore, they ordered water to be given to them as an offering to Zhao Qiang. Chen Xiao couldn't understand what kind of nonsense they were talking about. Men considered this global heat wave a punishment for humanity because people recklessly plundered the Earth's resources and destroyed the environment. And now it was only through abstinence that they could beg for forgiveness. They ordered them to bring water as a gift to Zhao Qian, otherwise death would soon overtake them. Chen Xiao was wondering what the hell was going on, but this one turned out to be a bunch of cowards that had fallen into the sect. The men were offended by his words, but they had seen Zhao Chang perform miracles, and when they saw Ye Guo for themselves, they would definitely join the sect and kneel down. Mu Chang clicked his tongue, not understanding this bunch of religious loonies. Chen Xiao took a bottle of water in his hand, reminding them of the words about abomination, and that if you drink water, you can incur the wrath of the heavens. He pointedly started drinking water from the bottle, spilling half of it, and then he sighed with pleasure. All the guys were shocked. How could he dare to spill water on the ground while waiting for retribution? The system collected their negative emotions. Chen Xiao didn't understand why he should enjoy it alone, if he could share the joy. He invited them to shout insults at Zhao Chang, and then he would present them with a bucket of water. The man considered it a pure sin, and the system was gathering his incredible anger while the guys behind him were exchanging glances. They specified whether they will definitely receive a bucket of water for this. Chen Xiao promised to keep his promise. The man quickly gagged them, but one of them still shouted an insult. He ordered the traitor to be captured while he was dreaming of water. Chen Xiao realized that the guy wouldn't be able to enjoy the water. The company quickly left. Mu Wang admitted that he was even scared, but it was strange that they didn't attack. Chen Xiao realized that it wasn't that simple, but he knew that something would have to be done if they continued to interfere with them. There were clear water sect flyers hanging in the alleys. Chen Xiao arrived at a large cathedral building. He understood that it would be impossible to simply destroy them by brute force, because this might lead to a negative reaction from people. So first, he wanted to see what kind of trash Zhao Qiang really was. He peeked through the window and watched them. There, he picked up a bottle of water, and I decided to show it to my subordinates. He started pouring water on the unconscious girl, and she suddenly opened her eyes. He demonstrated how a couple of drops of water helped the girl from heat stroke. Chen Xu guessed that the girl was just an actress, or that Zhao Qian might have been an awakened one. The girl sat on the floor and didn't know how to thank Zhao Chang for saving her life, and she wanted to stay by his side and serve him. Zhao Chang explained that the gods remember everyone who brought gifts, but the greedy ones would definitely face punishment, and the thermal apocalypse was a divine purge. He claimed that only volunteers who put their faith in the gods would survive, and the gods will remember every offering. He ordered everyone to give away the unclean water, and he would purify it for them. All of a sudden, the guys noticed Chen Xiao, not understanding what he was doing. They forbade dirty heretics to come to them. Chen Xiao started to play his part that he realized everything, and it was getting hotter outside, and the water was getting sparser. He fell to his knees and was afraid to die like a dog. Chen Xiao begged to be saved and was willing to hand over the unclean items. Everyone was shocked by the amount of water he brought. So Qiang had heard of him and knew his grave sins. But since he had come and was ready to start with a clean slate, The gods were ready to give him another chance. Chen Xiao knew that he was simply confiscating all the water from people, only returning the absolute minimum for survival, and called it holy water. These people are unlikely to survive until next month. He thanked the master with a smile. At this moment, an old man ran out of the cathedral in a panic, saying that one of the granddaughters had fainted, as if she had a heat stroke. The girl was lying on the bed unconscious, and no one could understand how it happened. Her aunt even gave her holy water. Chen Xiao listened and realized that she was deceiving Uncle Wang about her granddaughter's heat stroke just to take the water away from him. The aunt knelt down and begged Zhao Qiang to save the child, and she would bring twice as many offerings. He reminded her that the gods weren't personal babysitters, and if holy water didn't work, there was one explanation. Zhao Qiang called her not godly enough. My aunt didn't understand how this was possible. He did not want to listen to excuses and demanded to think about his loyalty. Zhao Qiang was going to perform a miracle at noon tomorrow, and every single one of them would witness it. Chen Xiao grinned. He was handed a bandage on his arm, which signified his participation in the pure water sect. Since he had sacrificed so much water, Zhao Qiang was willing to let go of his past, but it was worth remembering his sins. He immediately put it on, but inside he didn't understand what kind of group of idiots they were. Chen Xiao smiled because they didn't know that the water bottles had trackers installed on them. Later, when they left, he found the bottles on the tracker, and he used his ability. Thanks to this, he easily opened the door. And in that moment, he was surprised. A room filled with various food items appeared in front of him. Chen Xiao never expected that the sect was a simple scam to line their pockets. At that moment, he turned around when he heard footsteps. Chen Xiao hid behind the boxes and eavesdropped on Zhao Qiang's meeting with that girl. He immediately slapped her across the face. Zhao Qiang had ordered her to pretend to be a fully recovered patient, but she looked sickly, so no one would believe her. She was apologizing to him because using her abilities took away a lot of her stamina. Zhao Qiang called her a useless trash, reminding her who pulled her out of hell. Chen Xiao realized that this girl was the true awakened one. He grinned as he came up with an interesting idea. Some time passed. The girl was still lying in bed in a bad state. At that moment, Chen Xiao sneaked up on her. He waved his hand. Water bottles rained down sharply on her. The girl woke up to the noise. I didn't know who he was. Chen Xiao simply ordered her to drink everything, and if she survived the night, she would get answers to her questions. The day came. Zhao Qiang was standing in front of the people with the girl. At this moment, they sat down in the lotus position, and he began to demonstrate that as long as they kept the divine in their heart, the scorching heat of the sun would not be able to harm the messenger of the gods. The girl closed the umbrella. Auntie almost cried when everyone believed in the spectacle. Chen Xiao now understood that Zhao Qiang had used the ability to deceive the public. This girl was helping him, and Chen Xiao couldn't know exactly the nature of her ability, but he used his own to sever their bond, and he thought that he could break her power with space. The girl suddenly felt that someone else's power was preventing her from using the ability. At that moment, he began to sweat from the terrible heat. Zhao Qiang opened his eyes and didn't understand what she was doing. The girl was incredibly nervous, not understanding what exactly was stopping her. He ordered her to come closer so that the miracle would definitely happen. She could feel the terrible heat and knew that with her current condition, she wouldn't be able to stay there for even a couple of minutes. All the people watched patiently. Chen Xiao was grinning, and abruptly the girl recognized him from the crowd. Zhao Qiang urged her to support him. She recalled that threatening letter to Zhao Qiang when she was given time to switch sides. She focused. She slowly started walking away in the opposite direction as Zhao Qiang insulted her in the back. He stiffened abruptly. He noticed that the girl was standing next to Chen Xiao. She wrapped her arms around him. Chen Xiao didn't expect her to switch to a friend so quickly. Sighed. The girl said that her ability is to forcibly dissipate heat, and it dramatically accelerated the transfer of internal body heat to its surface. Chen Xiao found this ability very useful, but she told me about another application. She had forced heat dissipation directed exclusively at the head and heart, and when the heat from the head and heart is instantly removed, it causes a drop in the blood supply to the brain. Chen Xiao was shocked, not understanding what was going on. His head was spinning as he realized that the girl had set him up. Linjin was lost in her memories during the day. She was holding a cat that was near death due to the heat, but she felt good in her arms. Suddenly, a man called out to her from the balcony. When she arrived, he knocked her to the floor. The man was unhappy that he worked hard for her upbringing and demanded payment, and he ordered her to sleep with anyone who wanted her to bring water. At this moment, Zhao Qiang burst into the room with the men. He was disgusted by what he saw. After a while, the man was shot in the head. Zhao Qiang slowly walked over to her. And I saw the cat in her arms on the street come to life. He truly considered it a gift from the gods. I offered to go with him to save hundreds of souls. At this moment, Chen Xiao was forced to his knees, and he was standing in front of Zhao Qiang. He glared at him. He moved his hands sharply, cutting through those who were holding him. The crowd screamed in fear, thinking he was a monster. He stood up, reminding people that these benefactors were all bandits, and Chen Xiao considered them hopeless if they blindly trusted these freaks. Mustang handed him the information about Zhao Cheng's group. No one could believe his words. Everyone claimed that he was lying, and the girl suddenly appeared from behind him. The aunt was happy that she was fine, claiming that the guy was wrong. She had been praying all night, so her granddaughter had recovered, which meant that Ningjiang Chang was working wonders. Therefore, everyone was ordered to capture the demon. But the girl suddenly thought that everyone had a problem with their heads. She said that this guy saved her, and not a representative of the cult. After all, he was the one who gave her the drink that saved her life. And if it wasn't for him, the girl would have died because of their superstitions. Everyone abruptly fell silent after her words. Lin Jin also froze in place from shock. She plummeted to the ground. Xiao Cheng fired a gun at her, calling her useless trash. She fell to the ground, but there was no injury on her. Xiao Cheng didn't understand how this was possible. After all, he had definitely fired a shot. It turned out that Chen Xiao had grabbed the bullet with his ability, intending to keep it for himself. Zhao Qiang grinned as he realized that there was an awakened one in front of him, and now it was clear how he blocked her attack. Chen Xiao already wanted to put an end to this farce. Xiao Qiao suddenly had a full-on grin on his face. Before Chen Xiao could react, Zhao Qiang injected an unknown substance into his leg, and it grew several times like a mutant, having prepared in advance. Chen Xiao realized that it was the same Lin Guodong's serum. He was paying a huge price for this booster, and he attacked Chen Xiao. Xiao Qiao wondered how he was handling his speed. He grabbed it and jumped from the balcony to die together. They started to fall, and Zhao Qiang had been waiting for this day for a very long time. Zhao Qiang was just a village boy with a cram who had broken through to a top university and could never compete with the academic clans. His research had been stolen and his youth squandered, and in the old world he'd never had a chance to fight back. But then came the apocalypse, which completely evened the odds. Zhao Qing was sobbing in pain that Chen Xiao had ruined everything for him. Chen Xiao was sure that only Zhao Chang would die here, as long as the system unlocked the space jump for him. It abruptly disappeared from his hands. Zhao Cheng opened his eyes, not understanding what had happened. As a result, he was the only one who crashed. Chen Xiao found him pathetic because he only knew how to blame others for his failures. All the people started accusing him of witchcraft, but he didn't listen and just walked away in silence. Lin Jin continued to lie on the ground unconscious. Chen Shou guessed that she had simply passed out from extreme exhaustion and shock. He took out a bottle of water from the black hole. Everyone was telling him not to touch her. Auntie was sure that Lin Jin was responsible for Zhao Chang's death. Chen Xiao asked them to be quiet because they were bothering him. Everyone was shouting, calling him a heretic, and going to purify his soul with hymns of praise. The crowd abruptly surrounded him, and they joined hands. They began to sing a divine song. The old man was singing right in his face. Chen Xiao remained neutral as the song played. In an instant, all of their heads abruptly fell off and blood began to flow. Lin Jin woke up and wanted to explain, but Chen Xiao just handed her some water to keep her alive. She asked where Zhao Cheng was. Chen Xiao immediately told her about his death, but he offered to see him one last time. At this moment, a granddaughter appeared in front of them. They were both in shock. My aunt now realized that all of life was a lie and that there were no gods, and abruptly jumped down from the balcony. Chen Xiao hugged the little girl who saw this with her own eyes. She was crying bitterly, but she asked me not to worry about her because my grandmother decided to leave her. She wasn't going to give up and wanted to survive longer. Some time passed. Chen Xiao sat Lin Jin down on the sofa. She confessed that she truly considered Zhang Chang her savior, and I saw how angry he was with himself for not being awake. Chen Xiao knew that before the apocalypse, he couldn't break into academia, and after the heat wave, he didn't manage to become an awakened one, so he died full of grief and resentment. Lin Jin thanked him, remembering how she was terrified all the time and wanted to help people, but before she knew it, she had become an accomplice. The little girl noticed how beautiful Lin Jin was. Even though she obeyed him so much, he still tried to shoot her in the end. It dawned on her that the rumors were true after all. Cheng Ban had always liked men. She smiled awkwardly. There was no way Chen Xiao would allow the second Zhao Qian to appear, and just doing business wasn't enough. He wanted to take control of the area. Zhao Chang was dead, but he still had a huge supply of water left. He admitted that he had destroyed this cult and could have taken all the water for himself. But as long as they obey his orders, he will share the water with them. People sincerely thanked him for his kindness. Mu Ding wanted to know exactly what Chen Xiao was up to. They went to the sealed building. The man handed them the papers. These were documents for the transfer of property, and for this, Chen Xiao gave him permission to take water. Mukung began to worry that Chen Xiao wanted to buy up the entire building. He felt that one floor of the shelter wasn't enough, and he wanted to turn the entire building into his own fortress. Some time passed. Chen Xiao looked out of the window at the dreadful streets, not understanding how things had come to this. Even the buildings couldn't withstand the heat. He was watching the sunset intently, and he knew that the second heat wave would soon begin. The temperature will be even harsher, and the rebar on buildings will soften, causing them to collapse. Therefore, a complete reconstruction was a necessity. Now all the residents here trusted him and agreed to move. On TV, they said that the heat was finally expected to subside, but this would only be a temporary phenomenon because the temperature could still rise. Chen Xiao grinned, knowing that the heat would never come down. But thanks to this, they can at least catch their breath. People walked along the street just like in the old days and felt completely comfortable. Chen Xiao knew that now was the best time to renovate the building. But before that, he still had things to do. The girl was sitting on the couch, eating chips. He asked her when she would leave. The girl didn't expect him to want to kick her out. At that moment, she snapped her fingers, and the mosquito immediately died from the current. She knew that he would need her ability. Chen Xiao understood that the generators were burning a huge amount of diesel, and the solar panels were losing efficiency, so he needed someone to generate electricity. He allowed her to stay as long as she liked. The little girl immediately ran to Lin Jin's sister. Chen Xiao wanted to stop her, but decided to go check it out as well. He was thinking about Lin Jin's abilities, which were incredibly valuable in the current world, so he put her up in his building to make it easier to use. The girl realized that she had forgotten to bring a present. She ran back as Chen Xiao watched her go. Chen Xiao knocked on her door, but he was surprised that the door wasn't closed. In front of him was Lin Jin, who had just come out of the shower. He froze in shock. The girl screamed, thinking that he did it on purpose. But she didn't close the door herself. Lin Jin reminded him that he hadn't given her the keys himself. He quickly closed the door in shame. Chen Xiao hoped that she didn't regret moving here. He hoped he wasn't thinking of him as Zhao Qian. Lin Jin was well aware that he wanted to use her abilities, but even if he pursued her desires, he was still a failure. The girl approached him, not understanding what he was doing. Just like that, Lin Jin stayed by Chen Xiao's side and took responsibility for redistributing the confiscated water resources. For her, it was a kind of redemption. It's been 7 days since the heat wave stopped. The guys were standing outside and enjoying the weather. Grandpa Wang and Lin Jin lived on the second floor, and on the third floor lived Mu Kang and Li Yu. The fourth floor was under Alan's ownership. Chen Xiao was on the roof and standing right on the cliff. He understood that the resources that were needed to create a defense system for the entire building were not something that an ordinary person could mobilize. At this moment, Chen Xiao noticed a crowd of guys outside the building. The bandits heard that there was a lot of water here, and only one person occupied the building. The man was surprised that in such a small city, there was a daredevil. But he wasn't too worried, and he was going to blow it up and finish it. After that, they were all lying on the ground. Chen Xiao noticed that during this pause in the heat, all the criminals started to run across the borders, and now gangs from other places are walking around here. After several instances of establishing dominance, even newly arrived gangs have learned to stay away from his compound. Meanwhile, at the government's temporary command center, the man could see that something was wrong because the entire Luo city was collapsing, and one residential complex remained calm. He remembered that it was there that the cult had recently been destroyed. With their current crisis, they didn't have the resources to interfere in their petty squabbles. But his gut told him it wasn't that simple. Extreme heat has destroyed the usual reality, and everything in this city shows too many anomalies that go beyond. The girl said that they raised the records and you need to approve a couple of details. She showed a recording from the Luo City Church on the day of the mass casualty incident, and when Chen Xiao falls, he instantly disappears. But then he appeared on the roof completely unharmed. The man ordered an immediate team to investigate. At night, they went to his apartment complex, and they found him trapped in the power grid. They were able to easily bypass it and reach the main door. With one device, they cracked its code and quickly broke in from the foot, but their faces were immediately filled with horror. There was a little girl standing there who couldn't understand anything. She immediately started crying, thinking that she was hallucinating because of the games. The soldiers couldn't figure out what she was doing here, but they decided to neutralize her first. All of a sudden, Aline showed her abilities to remove intruders. The floor was fully illuminated with electricity. Aline had no idea if it was the government or not, but she doubted that she would be arrested during the apocalypse. Chen Xiao was woken up by the noise, but he didn't understand why Alan was still staying with him. Alan reported the problem with a grim face. His eyes widened when he saw everything. 30 minutes later, a whole mountain of tanks abruptly drove up to the building. The commander ordered Chen Xiao to immediately lay down their weapons and hand over their men, Otherwise, they would use force. Mutang also woke up due to the noise. He stood up to check. And I was shocked when I noticed the military under the building. Lin Jin also woke up and looked out. Grandpa Wang couldn't understand what the military was doing here. Chen Xiao signaled them to stay in their respective rooms. And I was going to solve this issue myself. He boldly went straight to the military. He wanted an explanation for why their men had broken into his house in the middle of the night. The commander explained that they had seen the events from the church that day, and he knew that Chen Xiao had supernatural powers. Now, he definitely believed the rumors about people with abilities. He considered it a rare power in their time and asked them to agree to cooperate with military research, and then they would forget about the events of tonight. Chen Xiao knew that their research would lead to his imprisonment in the laboratory, but he wasn't interested at all. He frowned. Chen Xiao didn't want to repeat himself twice. The commander decided not to delay for a long time and ordered to start firing. The soldiers started firing at it from tanks, but Chen Xiao activated the spatial barrier. The military could not understand what was happening and how it was possible. Chen Xiao directed his power at him. A black hole appeared right in the sky near the helicopters and sucked them in, which caused them to explode, creating an accident. He knew that normal attacks wouldn't be effective against him, but he hadn't expected such strength. Chen Xiao was going to target his men next time. Therefore, the commander immediately decided to surrender, but said that the weather service report had already been published, and the previous heat wave was just the beginning, and the next wave will be much more serious. Chen Xiao, with a smile, already knew this very well. The commander announced that they would need such people sooner or later, and even the survival of humanity depended on him. Chen Xiao didn't consider himself a great savior, and he was going to destroy anyone who interfered with his sleep. Moreover, the commander wanted to hear his conclusion. Chen Xiao was willing to help him for the deal. He was willing to make a deal even after a couple of days of working together, Chen Xiao cheerfully stated, wanting to use the army's resources to turn